I am Dan, 32 years old, and I have spent my entire life in the shadow of my older brother Marcus. While I quietly built my career in software development, Marcus was always the one boasting loudly about his tech executive position. At our family Easter dinner last spring, he was putting me down again with his usual condescension when something unexpected happened. My 82-year-old grandmother, who never raises her voice, changed everything with just one question. Before I continue my story, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about family dynamics and workplace revelations. Trust me, you will want to hear how my grandmother silenced an entire dinner table with just one sentence. Growing up, my relationship with Marcus was defined by his status as the golden child of our family. 4 years older than me at 36, Marcus was everything I was not in our parents' eyes. He was athletic, making the football and basketball teams with ease. He was outgoing, always the center of attention at family gatherings, with his loud laugh and endless stories. His charisma seemed to fill every room he entered, while I often felt invisible standing nearby. Our parents, James and Caroline, never explicitly favored him, but their actions spoke volumes. Dad would reschedule important work meetings to attend Marcus's games, but would often miss my academic competitions due to unavoidable commitments. Mom would proudly display his sports trophies on the living room mantel, while my science fair certificates were tucked away in a drawer in my bedroom. When Marcus got a B-, they would celebrate his effort. When I got an A-, they would ask why it was not an A+. Only my grandma Eleanor seemed to truly see me. She was the one who bought me my first computer when I was 10, recognizing something in me that even I had not yet discovered. Different flowers bloom in different seasons. She would tell me when I felt inadequate compared to Marcus. Your time will come, Daniel. And when it does, it will be magnificent. My entry into technology was almost accidental. At 13, I discovered coding through a library book Grandma Eleanor had suggested. While Marcus was scoring touchdowns on the field, I was creating my first simple programs in our basement. There was something deeply satisfying about the logic of code, the way it either worked or it did not. Unlike the subjective world of social hierarchies where Marcus excelled, coding gave me clear feedback and measurable progress. By high school, our paths had diverged completely. Marcus was prom king and football captain, with average grades but impressive social connections. I was the quiet kid who built the school's first functional website and won the state technology competition. When college applications came around, I received a full scholarship to Stanford based on academic merit and my growing portfolio of coding projects. Marcus went to Princeton, not because of his grades, but because our parents could afford the tuition, and his extracurriculars looked good on paper. Our approaches to education reflected our fundamental differences. I immersed myself in learning, taking extra courses, and staying late to work with professors on research projects. Marcus joined the right fraternities and attended networking events, making connections with children of tech executives and venture capitalists. He studied just enough to pass, focusing instead on building what he called his personal brand. After graduation, our career paths continued to reflect these differences. I joined a small, innovative startup called Next Gen Technologies, taking an entry-level position that paid barely enough to cover my rent in a shared apartment. I chose it specifically because they were working on breakthrough cloud architecture that fascinated me. Marcus, meanwhile, leveraged a family connection to land a management position at a well-established firm, complete with a corner office and salary that allowed him to buy a downtown condo immediately. It is about who you know, not what you know, little brother, he would tell me at family gatherings, patting my shoulder condescendingly. That is something they do not teach you in all those coding books. Our professional philosophies could not have been more different. I believed in building things that worked, creating value through innovation, and earning advancement through demonstrated ability. Marcus believed in perception management, strategic job hopping for title improvements, and what he called executive presence. While I stayed at NextGen for years, gradually moving up as my contributions proved valuable, Marcus changed companies every 18 months, each time with a more impressive title and salary bump. Within 5 years, I had become a senior developer at NextGen, helping to build the core technology that would eventually become our flagship product. Within the same period, Marcus had become a vice president at Trendwave, a flashy, marketing-heavy tech company that produced sleek presentations, but, from what I could tell, not much actual technology. His Instagram was filled with business-class flights, tech conferences in exotic locations, and networking dinners with people he called industry disruptors. By year 7, something interesting had happened at NextGen. Our technology had gained serious traction, and the company had grown exponentially. I had been promoted to lead a critical division, and though my title was simply technical director, I had quietly become part of the inner circle, making acquisition decisions. NextGen had started purchasing smaller companies with promising technologies or patents, integrating them into our expanding ecosystem. Meanwhile, Marcus had continued his upward trajectory at Trendwave, at least in title. He was now Executive Vice President of Innovation Strategy, a position that sounded impressive, but that I suspected involved more presentations than actual innovation. What our family did not know, but industry insiders were beginning to whisper about, was that Trendwave was struggling financially. Their business model relied heavily on venture capital funding rather than sustainable revenue, and their last 2 rounds of financing had been less successful than reported. Despite the reality of our situations, family perception remained unchanged. At holiday gatherings, Marcus would hold court, describing his executive decisions and name-dropping famous tech personalities. I would mention some technical challenge I had solved, only to see eyes glaze over. When he mentioned his 6-figure bonus, our parents would beam with pride. When I tried to explain the patent I had recently been awarded, the conversation would quickly shift to Marcus's upcoming keynote speech at a tech conference. Your brother is really making a name for himself in the industry, relatives would tell me, as if I should aspire to be more like him. Maybe he can help you move up into management someday. What they did not know was that NextGen had begun the confidential process of evaluating Trendwave for potential acquisition. The initial assessment had been assigned to my team, and the results were not favorable. Trendwave had impressive marketing and a portfolio of clients, but their technology was largely superficial, and their financial foundation was shaky. The only real value we saw was in some patents they had acquired and their client relationships, and I was the one who would be making the recommendation to our executive team about whether to proceed. The irony of the situation was not lost on me, but I kept it to myself, maintaining the strict confidentiality that such sensitive business matters required. Besides, who would believe me anyway? In my family's eyes, Marcus would always be the successful one, regardless of reality. The week before Easter, I received the official notification that NextGen's board had approved the acquisition of Trendwave. The email from our CEO was marked strictly confidential and outlined the timeline for the announcement, which would come the Tuesday after Easter weekend. My team had done the due diligence, and despite my personal connection, I had given an honest assessment. Trendwave's technology was not worth much, but their patent portfolio and client list justified a modest acquisition price. What the email did not say, but what I knew from internal discussions, was that most of Trendwave's executive team would be thanked for their service and let go within 3 months of the acquisition. Their roles were redundant, their expertise questionable, and their salaries incompatible with NextGen's more pragmatic compensation structure. Only a few key technical staff would be retained to maintain continuity with existing clients. This put me in an impossible position. I knew my brother was about to experience a major professional setback, but I was bound by confidentiality agreements and securities laws that prevented me from warning him. Part of me felt guilty, knowing that the Easter dinner would be the last family gathering where he could boast without knowing what was coming. Another part of me, the part I was less proud of, felt a certain vindication that finally, the family would see which brother had built a sustainable career. The confidentiality agreements were explicit and legally binding. Revealing the acquisition before the public announcement could constitute insider trading, potentially resulting in criminal charges, not to mention immediate termination of my position. But beyond the legal ramifications, there was a matter of professional integrity. I had worked hard to earn my place at NextGen, and I took my responsibilities seriously. As I prepared for the family gathering, my anxiety grew. My relationship with Marcus had been strained for years, sustained mainly through obligatory family events rather than genuine brotherhood. Our parents, now in their 60s, still looked at him with the same adoration they had when he was scoring touchdowns in high school. How would they react when they learned that their golden child's career was about to hit a significant obstacle? The day before Easter, Grandma Eleanor called me. Though she was 82, she had embraced technology with surprising enthusiasm, even maintaining active social media accounts to keep track of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. "Daniel, how are you feeling about tomorrow?" she asked, her voice carrying the wisdom of her years. "The usual," I replied, trying to sound casual. Ready for Marcus to talk about his latest business triumph, while everyone nods along. There was a pause on the line. "You know, I follow business news pretty closely these days. Technology stocks, especially." My heart skipped a beat. Grandma Eleanor had always been perceptive, but surely she could not know about the acquisition. "Oh yeah? Find any good investments?" "Just observations," she said cryptically. "I will be interested to see how tomorrow unfolds." Remember, truth has a way of surfacing, one way or another. After we hung up, I wondered if she somehow knew, but that was impossible. The acquisition was known only to the highest levels of both companies and the legal teams handling the transaction. Still, her words left me uneasy. Easter morning arrived with perfect spring weather. As I dressed in a casual button-down shirt and slacks appropriate for a family dinner, my phone pinged with a final confirmation email about the acquisition paperwork being complete. All that remained was the public announcement scheduled for Tuesday. I took a deep breath, slipped the phone into my pocket, and headed to my car for the hour-long drive to my parents' suburban home. The familiar neighborhood with its manicured lawns brought back a flood of childhood memories, most of them featuring Marcus succeeding and me watching from the sidelines. I parked behind several other cars already in the driveway. Marcus's luxury sedan was prominently positioned nearest to the house, of course. Taking a moment to compose myself, I grabbed the Easter gifts I had purchased and approached the front door. Before I could knock, it swung open to reveal my mother, her face lighting up. "Dan, so good to see you," she said, giving me a quick hug before peering over my shoulder. "Are you alone? I thought maybe you might bring someone this year." It was her subtle way of reminding me that, unlike Marcus, who had brought a succession of impressive girlfriends to family gatherings over the years, my focus on career had left little time for serious relationships. "Just me, Mom," I replied with a practiced smile. "Where is everyone?" "In the backyard. Marcus is telling everyone about his new company initiative. Something about revolutionary algorithm integration. It sounds very impressive." I nodded, unsurprised. Revolutionary algorithm integration was exactly the kind of meaningless tech jargon Marcus excelled at deploying. I followed her through the house to the backyard where the rest of the family had gathered. The scene was familiar. Marcus stood in the center of a small crowd of relatives, gesturing animatedly as he spoke. My father hovered nearby, beaming with pride. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins listened with expressions ranging from genuine interest to polite attention. And there, sitting slightly apart, with a knowing smile, was Grandma Eleanor. When she saw me, she waved me over, patting the seat beside her. "Perfect timing," she said quietly as I sat down. "Your brother was just explaining how his company is positioned to dominate the market this year." I glanced over to where Marcus was speaking. "Trendwave is redefining the integration of marketing analytics and consumer behavior prediction," he was saying, confidently. "We are using cutting-edge artificial intelligence to revolutionize how companies understand their customers." Our cousin Jeffrey, who worked in retail management, looked suitably impressed. "That sounds amazing, Marcus. Is that why your company has been in the business press so much lately?" Marcus smiled broadly, though I noticed a slight tightness around his eyes. If he knew about the financial challenges Trendwave was facing, he was hiding it well. "Exactly. We are disrupting the entire industry. Everyone wants a piece of what we are building." That was technically true, I thought wryly. NextGen wanted several pieces of Trendwave, just not the pieces Marcus was responsible for. As if sensing my thoughts, Marcus's gaze landed on me. "Dan, there you are, little brother. I was just telling everyone about the cutting-edge work we are doing at Trendwave. How are things in your world? Still writing code all day?" The subtle dismissiveness in his tone was familiar. To Marcus, technical work was lesser than his executive function, despite the fact that without people writing code all day, his company would have nothing to sell. "Things are good," I said simply, not taking the bait. "Busy, but good, I bet," he replied with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Tech support keeping you on your toes?" A few relatives chuckled. Marcus had always deliberately mischaracterized my role this way, implying I was merely providing technical support, rather than architecting systems. Before I could respond, my mother called out that it was time to start bringing food to the table for dinner. As everyone began moving inside, Grandma Eleanor squeezed my arm gently. "Patience," she whispered. "The truth speaks for itself." Eventually, our family Easter dinner was steeped in tradition. From the meticulously arranged table settings to the specific dishes that appeared year after year, Mom's glazed ham took center stage, surrounded by scalloped potatoes, spring vegetables, fresh rolls, and the deviled eggs that Aunt Patricia insisted on bringing despite the fact that nobody particularly enjoyed them. Crystal glasses sparkled under the dining room chandelier, and the good china, used only for holidays, was set out with precision. The seating arrangement was as traditional as the menu. Dad at the head of the table, Mom at the foot, with Marcus placed prominently at Dad's right hand. I sat directly across from Marcus, with Grandma Eleanor beside me. The rest of the extended family filled in the remaining seats, aunts, uncles, and cousins, creating a full table of 14 people. Dad, as was customary, said grace, giving thanks for family, health, and prosperity. I noticed his specific mention of gratitude for Marcus's continued success in his career, while my professional life warranted only inclusion in the general blessings upon all our family members. It was a small, slight, likely unconscious, but it stung nevertheless. The initial conversation was pleasant enough, focusing on Cousin Rachel's new baby, Uncle Stephen's recent retirement, and Aunt Diana's plan to renovate her kitchen. I was content to eat quietly, answering direct questions but otherwise staying beneath the radar, as had become my habit at family gatherings. This peaceful interlude lasted until the main course was nearly finished, when Uncle Robert, always interested in business matters, turned the conversation toward careers. "So, Marcus," he said, refilling his wine glass, "I read something about changes in the tech sector. Companies tightening belts, even some layoffs at the bigger firms. Is that affecting Trendwave at all?" I tensed slightly, wondering how Marcus would handle this question that cut uncomfortably close to his company's undisclosed financial troubles. Marcus laughed confidently, setting down his fork. "Robert, That is exactly why Trendwave is positioned to thrive right now. When traditional companies pull back, that creates space for innovators like us to capture market share. In fact, we are expanding. I just approved 3 new executive hires last week. This was news to me. According to the financial documents my team had reviewed, Trendwave had implemented a hiring freeze 2 months ago. Either Marcus was lying, or he was out of the loop on his own company's financial decisions. That is impressive. Uncle Robert nodded. The tech world moves so fast these days. Hard for us older folks to keep up. It is all about adaptability. Marcus continued, warming to his favorite subject, himself. Not everyone can succeed in the upper echelons of the tech world. It takes a certain mindset, an ability to see the big picture that most technical people simply do not have. His gaze flicked briefly to me, the implication clear. I took another bite of ham, refusing to engage, but Marcus was not done. I mean, coding is important. Sure, entry-level stuff. But the real value comes from vision and leadership. The ability to direct those technical resources toward market opportunities. That is where the real careers in tech are made. Mom beamed at him. Marcus has always had such natural leadership abilities, even as a child. Remember when he organized that neighborhood carnival for charity? Dad added proudly. 11 years old, and already delegating tasks to the other kids. I remembered it well. I had spent hours building the games, while Marcus had given orders, and then taken credit. When the local newspaper came to take pictures, the conversation continued in this vein, with various family members contributing their memories of Marcus's childhood leadership moments. I remained silent, pushing potatoes around my plate, and wondering how soon I could politely leave. Then Marcus, perhaps emboldened by the family admiration or the second glass of wine, made the statement that would change everything. The truth is, he said, his voice carrying clearly across the table, not everyone can handle a real career in tech. Some people are just more comfortable, staying in their safe little technical spaces, never taking risks or stepping into the spotlight. He was looking directly at me now, not even bothering to disguise the comparison. A hush fell over the table as the comment hung in the air. Too pointed to ignore. I saw my mother's expression flicker with discomfort, while my father frowned slightly, perhaps recognizing that Marcus had crossed a line from general boasting to specific insult. Just as I was deciding whether to respond or let it pass, Grandma Eleanor's voice broke the silence. Clear and surprisingly strong for her age, she turned to me and asked, "Is that why your company just bought his?" The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear a pin drop in that dining room. Every head turned toward me, then to Marcus, whose face had drained of color, then back to me again. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. My father froze with his wine glass halfway to his lips. Marcus found his voice first. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his confident demeanor cracking. "What does she mean, Dan?" All eyes were on me now. I sat there, caught between professional confidentiality and family dynamics, acutely aware that whatever I said next would permanently alter my relationship with everyone at the table. "Grandma," I began carefully. "How did you?" "Bloomberg Terminal," she replied with a small smile. "I follow the markets." The SEC filing was submitted Friday. Public information for those who know where to look. I took a deep breath. She was right. While the public announcement was scheduled for Tuesday, the regulatory filings had indeed been submitted Friday. Any savvy investor with access to the right resources could have found them. "Is it true?" Marcus demanded, his voice rising. "Is NextGen acquiring Trendwave, with the information already exposed?" I nodded slowly. "The announcement will be made Tuesday morning. I was not supposed to discuss it before then. You knew about this?" Marcus's face was flushed now, anger replacing shock. "For how long?" The due diligence process started about 3 months ago, I admitted. But I was under strict confidentiality agreements. I could not say anything. Due diligence? My father interjected, looking confused. What exactly is your role in this, Dan? Before I could answer, Marcus pushed his chair back forcefully. I do not believe this. My own brother, involved in a hostile takeover of my company, and sitting here letting me talk without saying a word? It is not a hostile takeover, I clarified, maintaining my composure despite the tension crackling around the table. Trendwave's board unanimously approved the acquisition. Your CEO and CFO have been in negotiations with us for months. Us? My mother repeated, her expression suggesting she was re-evaluating something fundamental about her understanding of my career. I lead the technical due diligence team at NextGen, I explained, finally revealing what I had never bothered to share with my family before. I report directly to the CTO and have input on all acquisition decisions. I have been in that role for almost 2 years now. The collective surprise around the table would have been comical under different circumstances. Even my father looked stunned, his perception of his son's respective career trajectories visibly shifting. So you knew, Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet now. You knew Trendwave was being acquired. You knew it would affect my position. And you sat there letting me talk about expansion plans. I was legally prohibited from discussing it, I repeated. And, technically, I still am, until the public announcement. Securities laws are very strict about this sort of thing. Convenient excuse, Marcus snapped. Always hiding behind rules and procedures instead of standing up for family. That stung. Partly because there was a grain of truth to it. I had felt conflicted about my role in the acquisition, but I had ultimately prioritized my professional responsibilities over warning my brother. What happens now? Aunt Patricia asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence that had fallen. All eyes turned back to me. I hesitated, aware that I was about to deliver news that would devastate my brother in front of the entire family. The acquisition is primarily for Trendwave's patent portfolio and client relationships, I said carefully. NextGen will be integrating the valuable assets and technologies into our existing structure. And the employees? Marcus pressed, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. Some technical staff will be retained to ensure continuity, I replied, unable to meet his eyes. Most executive positions will be redundant with our existing structure. The implication was clear. Marcus's job would not exist after the acquisition was complete. So, you are not just taking over my company, Marcus said, rising to his feet. You are firing me. My own brother. That is not my decision, I started to say, but he cut me off. Save it, he snapped. I need some air. He threw his napkin onto the table and stormed out of the dining room, the front door slamming. Moments later, the silence he left behind was deafening. As the front door slammed behind Marcus, the dining room erupted into confused conversation. My mother half rose from her chair, clearly torn between following her eldest son and demanding more information from me. My father sat stunned, his usual composure completely abandoned. I should go after him, Mom said. But Dad placed a hand on her arm. Give him a moment, Caroline, he advised, before turning his attention to me. Dan, I think you need to explain exactly what is happening here. All eyes around the table focused on me with varying expressions of shock, confusion, and in a few cases, a certain morbid fascination with the unfolding family drama. Only Grandma Eleanor appeared completely calm, sipping her water as if she had not just detonated a conversational bomb. The situation is complicated, I began, choosing my words carefully. NextGen has been expanding through strategic acquisitions for the past 3 years. Trendwave came onto our radar because they have some valuable patents and an impressive client list. But financially? Uncle Robert asked, his business acumen picking up on what I was not explicitly stating. I hesitated, then decided that partial honesty was the only viable path forward. Trendwave has been struggling to convert their market presence into sustainable revenue. Their last 2 funding rounds were not as successful as they needed to be. And Marcus did not know about the acquisition? Aunt Diana asked, her tone suggesting she found this hard to believe. Only the CEO, CFO, and board were informed, I explained. It is standard procedure to limit knowledge of potential acquisitions to the absolute minimum necessary personnel until the public announcement. Securities laws are extremely strict about this. But you knew, my father said, his voice unnaturally quiet. You knew, and you did not warn your brother. The accusation in his tone was unmistakable, and it stung more than I had anticipated. I was bound by confidentiality agreements and securities laws. I repeated. Telling Marcus would have been illegal, not to mention a fireable offense. He is your brother, Mom said simply, as if that single fact should override all legal and professional obligations. And what exactly is your role in all this? Dad asked, leaning forward. You said you lead the technical due diligence team? Since when? The genuine surprise in his question revealed just how little attention my parents had paid to my career progression. I have been in that position for almost 2 years, I replied, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from my voice. Before that, I was a senior systems architect. I have been with NextGen for 9 years now. Mom looked genuinely confused. But you never mentioned. I thought you were just doing programming work. I architect enterprise-level cloud systems and evaluate the technical assets of potential acquisition targets, I clarified. It is a senior leadership position. I have a team of 15 people reporting to me. The silence that followed made it clear that this information was recalibrating my family's entire perception of me. All those years of dismissing my career as somehow lesser than Marcus's flashier executive role were being reevaluated in real time. And what happens to Marcus now? My father finally asked. Most executive positions at Trendwave will be eliminated after the transition period, I admitted. But NextGen is known for offering fair severance packages, and someone with Marcus's experience should be able to find another position. Even as I said it, I knew how cold and corporate it sounded. His experience fabricating success at a failing company? Uncle Stephen muttered, earning a sharp look from my mother. The uncomfortable conversation was interrupted by the sound of a car engine starting outside, followed by tires squealing on pavement. Marcus was leaving, and from the sound of it, not in a careful driving state of mind. Mom stood up immediately. I need to call him. Make sure he is okay. As she hurried from the room. Dad fixed me with a disappointed look. I understand professional obligations, Dan. But family comes first. You should have found some way to warn him, give him time to prepare. Before I could respond, Grandma Eleanor spoke up. James, your son maintained his professional integrity in a difficult situation. That is something to be respected, not criticized. Dad turned to her, unusually sharp. Mom, with all due respect, you just publicly humiliated one of your grandsons in front of the entire family. I am not sure you are in a position to lecture about appropriate behavior. Grandma was unfazed. Sometimes truth needs a gentle push to come to light. These boys have been living in a distorted reality for too long, partly of your creation. The accusation hung heavy in the air. No one at the table dared speak as father and grandmother engaged in a silent battle of wills. Finally, Dad stood up. I need to check on your mother, he said stiffly, and left the dining room. The remaining family members exchanged awkward glances, clearly uncertain about the proper etiquette for a situation where one family member's company was acquiring another's amid decades of sibling rivalry. Well, Aunt Patricia said brightly, with forced cheerfulness, who is ready for dessert? The tension broken. If not resolved, people began to move. Some offered to help clear the table. Others drifted toward the kitchen, where Mom's famous coconut cream pie waited, and a few discreetly headed for their coats, sensing that this family gathering had reached its natural conclusion. Amid the movement, Grandma Eleanor caught my arm. "Come, sit with me on the porch for a moment," she said quietly. It was not a request, but a directive. Outside, the spring evening was cool but pleasant. We sat side by side on the wooden porch swing that had been part of my parents' home for as long as I could remember. "How did you really know about the acquisition?" I asked once we were alone. "The SEC filing would have been buried in thousands of others." Grandma smiled. "I have followed both your careers very closely. More closely than your parents, I suspect. When trend waves started appearing in articles about companies facing funding challenges, I set up alerts. And I have a friend whose grandson works in finance. He helps me understand the more technical aspects of SEC filings." I shook my head, amazed, but not entirely surprised. Grandma had always been sharper than anyone gave her credit for. "Why did you say it?" I asked. "You must have known it would cause exactly this kind of scene." She looked out at the darkening yard for a long moment before answering. "Do you remember when you were 8 and Marcus broke your science fair project the night before the exhibition?" I nodded, the memory still surprisingly painful after all these years. "Your parents told you that it was an accident, that siblings need to forgive each other. They helped you put together a simpler project that night, which received only a participation certificate. Meanwhile, Marcus faced no consequences." "I remember," I said quietly. "That was the pattern in your home, Daniel. Marcus shone while you were expected to accommodate, to understand, to step back. I watched it happen year after year, and I saw what it did to both of you. It made him entitled, and you overly cautious. Neither of those traits serve you well in life." She took my hand in her papery one. "Some truths need to be spoken aloud, not just for the listener, but for the speaker too. You have spent your life believing you were somehow less than your brother because that was the story this family told. Today, that story was corrected." "At what cost?" I asked, thinking of Marcus driving away in anger and my parents' clear disappointment in me. "Growth is rarely comfortable," she replied simply. "For any of you." We sat in silence for a few minutes, gently rocking on the swing. Finally, I asked the question that had been bothering me since her revelation at the dinner table. "Do you think I should have warned him somehow? Found a way around the confidentiality requirements?" Grandma considered this thoughtfully. "Professional integrity is important, Daniel. But so are personal relationships. The question is not whether you should have violated your professional obligations, but whether you truly wanted to protect Marcus, or whether part of you welcomed this moment of vindication." Her insight struck uncomfortably close to home. There had been a part of me, a part I was not proud of, that had anticipated the family finally seeing that my quiet, steady approach to career building had ultimately proven more successful than Marcus's self-promotion and corner-cutting. "I did not want it to happen like this," I said finally. "Of course not," she agreed. "But now that it has, what will you do next?" That is the more important question. Before I could answer, the porch door opened and my mother appeared, her expression tight with worry. "Marcus is not answering his phone," she said, her voice strained. "Dan, I think you should try to call him. He might answer for you." The irony of her statement was not lost on me. After years of Marcus being the favored son, she now believed I had the power to reach him when she could not. As I stood to follow her inside, Grandma Eleanor squeezed my hand one last time. "Remember, healing can only begin with truth. The rest is up to all of you." The days following Easter Sunday were among the most challenging of my professional life. While the acquisition announcement went forward as scheduled on Tuesday morning, sending next-gen stock up 3% and generating the expected business press coverage, the personal implications continued to unfold in unexpected ways. Marcus had not returned my calls Sunday night, nor had he responded to my carefully worded text messages, expressing concern and offering to talk when he was ready. By Monday morning, I was genuinely worried about his well-being. Enough to consider calling hospitals before my mother confirmed he had texted her a terse, "I am fine," around midnight. The professional complications began almost immediately. On Tuesday, just hours after the public announcement, I was called into a meeting with Barbara Wilson, our chief legal officer, Dan. She said, without preamble, once we were seated in her minimalist office, "I understand there was an incident involving the Trendwave acquisition and your brother over the weekend." My stomach dropped. "How did you hear about that?" She gave me a measured look. "Marcus called our CEO directly this morning. He made some accusations about your handling of confidential information and suggested your family relationship created a conflict of interest that should have been disclosed." "That is not true," I said immediately. "I maintained complete confidentiality throughout the process. My grandmother discovered the acquisition through publicly available SEC filings, not through any disclosure from me." Barbara nodded. "That aligns with what we believed. But we needed to address the allegation directly. For the record, did you disclose your family relationship with a Trendwave executive when the acquisition evaluation began?" I hesitated. "Not formally. It was generally known among the executive team that my brother worked there, but I did not submit any written disclosure." She made a note on her tablet. "In the future, even widely known connections should be formally documented. But I do not believe this rises to the level of an actual conflict, particularly since your assessment of Trendwave's technical assets was independently verified by 2 other teams." "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now we proceed with the integration as planned," she replied. "But, given the personal connection, we are going to remove you from direct involvement with the Trendwave transition team. Jacob Chen will take over that responsibility." While the decision made sense from a corporate governance perspective, it still felt like a professional setback. I had led the due diligence and should naturally have overseen the technical integration. Now, I was being sidelined from a high-visibility project that could have positioned me for further advancement. "I understand," I said, trying to mask my disappointment. "One more thing," Barbara added, as I stood to leave. "Marcus Harrington will be transitioning out of the company effective immediately, rather than remaining through the standard 3-month integration period." This was his request, not ours. I nodded, unsurprised but still saddened. Marcus was choosing to burn bridges rather than work through the situation professionally. The personal fallout was equally challenging. My parents called daily, their questions becoming increasingly pointed as they processed what had happened. Why had I never told them about my actual position at NextGen? Had I influenced the decision to acquire Trendwave specifically to undermine Marcus? Was there anything I could do to help him retain his position? "Mom," I explained for what felt like the 20th time, "I did not target Trendwave. They came onto our radar because of their patent portfolio and client relationships. And no, there is nothing I can do about Marcus's position. Those decisions were made at a level far above me." "But you could talk to someone," she insisted. "Put in a good word. He is your brother. That would be inappropriate and potentially illegal given the circumstances," I replied, my patience wearing thin. And honestly, Marcus does not want my help. He made that clear when he called our CEO to accuse me of ethical violations. The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes about where her sympathies still lay. Meanwhile, at work, dealing with the Trendwave employees was becoming increasingly awkward. Word had spread quickly that I was the brother who got Marcus Harrington fired, and former Trendwave staff regarded me with barely disguised hostility in the hallways. Even some NextGen colleagues seemed uncertain how to interact with me, as if my family drama might somehow be contagious. The situation came to a head in the 3rd week after the acquisition, when a critical integration issue arose with Trendwave's primary client interface. Jacob Chen, who had taken over my role on the transition team, requested an emergency meeting. "We need your input on this," he admitted reluctantly. The system architecture is more complex than we initially assessed, and none of us understand how these components interact. I reviewed the documentation he provided, immediately spotting the source of the confusion. You need access to the original architectural specifications. They should be in the technical documentation we received during due diligence. Jacob looked uncomfortable. That is the problem. The documentation is incomplete. According to the Trendwave engineers, the only person who fully understands the system architecture is Ryan Martinez, and he is refusing to cooperate because of his loyalty to Marcus. The irony was painful. The acquisition that had exposed my professional success to my family was now being threatened by the very family connection that had been revealed. Let me talk to Ryan, I offered, knowing it was the only viable solution. The conversation with Ryan was predictably difficult. He sat across from me in the conference room, arms crossed defensively, his expression making it clear he considered me the enemy. Look, I said after my initial attempts at professional discussion were met with monosyllabic responses. I understand your loyalty to Marcus. He has a way of inspiring that in people. But this integration is happening with or without your cooperation. The only question is whether the transition is smooth for clients or chaotic. Why should I care? Ryan asked bluntly. I will be gone in 3 months anyway. Just like everyone else from Trendwave. Not necessarily, I replied. Next-gen values technical expertise. The engineers who demonstrate their value during transition are typically offered permanent positions. He studied me skeptically. Is that a bribe or a threat? Neither. Just a fact. And another fact is that Marcus has already moved on. He received his severance package and is probably interviewing at other companies as we speak. Your loyalty is admirable, but it is not being reciprocated. Ryan's expression flickered slightly, suggesting I had struck a nerve. What do you need to know? He finally asked. The technical conversation that followed was productive, and by the end of the day, we had a viable plan for integrating the client systems without disruption. It was a professional victory, but it left me emotionally drained. That evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, staring at a takeout container I had no appetite for, my phone rang. Grandma Eleanor's name appeared on the screen. How are you holding up? She asked. When I answered, managing, I replied. Work is challenging. Family is worse. Your mother called me today, she said. She is worried about Marcus. Apparently, he is not handling the transition well. Has he found another position? Not yet. According to your mother, he is considering leaving tech altogether. Something about the industry being rigged against true innovators. I sighed, recognizing Marcus's tendency to externalize blame rather than acknowledge his own role in his company's failings. Dan, Grandma said, her voice gentle but firm. This situation will not resolve itself. Someone needs to take the first step toward reconciliation, and Marcus is not capable of being that person right now. You think it should be me? I asked, though I already knew her answer. I think you have always been the more emotionally mature of James and Caroline's sons, she replied. And I think carrying this rift will hurt you more in the long run than it will hurt him. After we hung up, I sat contemplating her words. The professional crisis was stabilizing, but the personal one showed no signs of resolution. And despite everything, despite the years of living in Marcus's shadow and finally having my accomplishments recognized, I found that I missed my brother, not the competitive, status-obsessed persona he presented to the world, but the occasional glimpses of the person underneath, the brother who had once taught me to ride a bike and had defended me against neighborhood bullies before our paths diverged. With a deep breath, I picked up my phone and composed a text message. We should talk. Coffee tomorrow? Just you and me. To my surprise, Marcus's response came almost immediately. Waterfront Cafe, 10 a.m. Do not be late. It was not warm, but it was a start. As I set my alarm for the next morning, I found myself both dreading and looking forward to the conversation that might begin to heal the rift between us, or potentially make it permanent. The waterfront cafe was busy with the mid-morning crowd when I arrived at precisely 9:55 a.m. I spotted Marcus immediately, seated at a corner table with his back to the wall, sunglasses still on despite being indoors. His posture was rigid, his expression unreadable behind the dark lenses. As I approached, I noticed the untouched coffee in front of him and the way his fingers drummed tensely on the table. "You came," he said flatly as I sat down. It was neither a question nor a greeting, merely an observation. "Of course I came," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I suggested we meet. Remember?" A server approached, and I ordered a black coffee, buying a moment to gather my thoughts. When we were alone again, Marcus removed his sunglasses, revealing tired eyes with dark circles beneath them. He looked like he had not slept well in days. "So," he began, his voice carrying an edge, "did you ask for this meeting to gloat or to offer me a job out of pity?" I took a deep breath, reminding myself that his anger was understandable given the circumstances. "Neither, Marcus. I wanted to talk because you are my brother, and what happened at Easter was not how I would have chosen for things to go down, how you would have chosen." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "That is rich. You led the team that evaluated my company for acquisition, knew for months that my position was being eliminated, and said nothing. Then sat at the dinner table while I talked about expansion plans. I was bound by confidentiality agreements," I began. But he cut me off. "Save the corporate line. This was not about legalities. This was about you finally getting one over on me, watching me walk right into public humiliation." His accusation stung, partly because there was a grain of truth to it. Had I truly wanted to warn him, I might have found some way to do so without explicitly violating confidentiality. "You are right," I admitted, surprising him. "Not entirely, but partly. I was legally bound by confidentiality, but I did not fight very hard to find a workaround. And part of me was satisfied that the family would finally see that your approach to career building was not as solid as mine." My honesty seemed to catch him off guard. He had clearly come prepared for a defensive conversation, not a confession. "Well," he said after a moment, "at least you admit it." The server returned with my coffee, giving us both a moment to regroup. When she left, I decided to take a risk with continued honesty. "The thing is, Marcus, as good as it felt in that moment, to have the family finally see my success, it has not actually felt good since. The whole situation has been miserable, professionally and personally, and I realized something important. Having Mom and Dad finally acknowledge my career accomplishments does not matter nearly as much as I thought it would." "Lucky you, coming to that realization after I lost my job," he replied. But his tone had softened slightly. "I know this has been difficult," I said carefully. "But you are talented, Marcus. You have skills and connections. You will land on your feet." He stared into his coffee. "Maybe. Maybe not. The industry is smaller than people think. Word gets around when an executive is part of a failed company. Trendwave was not a failure because of you," I said, surprising myself with the defensive statement. "The business model was flawed from the beginning, too dependent on continuous funding without a clear path to profitability. But the client relationships you built were solid. That is why NextGen wanted those assets." Marcus looked up, studying my face, as if trying to detect insincerity. "You really believe that?" "I do," I replied honestly. "Your ability to build relationships and inspire loyalty is remarkable. I saw it with the Trendwave engineers. They were ready to sabotage the integration out of loyalty to you, even after you had left." A hint of pride flickered across his face. Ryan and his team? I nodded. Ryan especially. I had to convince him that his loyalty was better directed toward ensuring a smooth transition for the clients than toward a symbolic protest that would ultimately hurt everyone. Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing this information. I did build a good team, he finally said. And the client relationships. I worked hard on those. I know you did. He took a sip of his now cold coffee, grimacing slightly. So where does that leave us? You have your big position, your successful company. I have a severance package and a reputation to rebuild. This was the opening I had been waiting for. It leaves us at a crossroads. We can continue as we have been, competitors rather than brothers. Or we can try something different. Different how? For starters, we could actually talk. Not just the surface-level updates at family gatherings, but really talk about our work, our lives, our insecurities. Insecurities? Marcus raised an eyebrow. What does the golden boy of Next Gen have to be insecure about? I laughed softly. Are you kidding? I have spent my entire life feeling second best. You were always the one everyone noticed, the one mom and dad bragged about. I worked twice as hard for half the recognition. That is not how I saw it. Marcus replied, genuine surprise in his voice. You were always the smart one, the one with the real technical skills. I was just good at talking about technology, not actually creating it. You were good at the parts of business that terrified me, I countered. Public speaking, networking, relationship building. I hid behind code because spreadsheets do not judge you. A thoughtful expression crossed Marcus's face. We each thought the other had it easier. Exactly. We sat in silence for a moment, the revelation settling between us like a newly discovered common ground. I knew, Marcus finally said, his voice quieter than before. About Trendwave's financial problems, I mean. Not about the acquisition specifically, but I knew we were in trouble. The last funding round barely closed, and the board was having emergency meetings weekly. I could not admit it. Not to myself, and certainly not to the family. The admission must have cost him considerable pride, and I recognized it as the peace offering it was. For what it is worth, I replied. I recommended that NextGen retain more of the Trendwave team than was initially planned. Not just for the transition period, but permanently, including in management positions. His eyes widened slightly. You did? I nodded. I submitted the recommendation last week. I suggested creating a client relations division that would preserve many of the relationships your team built. The executive committee is considering it. Why would you do that after I called your CEO to complain about you? I shrugged. Because it makes business sense. And because despite everything, you are still my brother. Marcus looked away, but not before I caught a glimpse of unexpected emotion in his eyes. When he turned back, his expression was more vulnerable than I had seen in years. I really messed up, did not I? Not just with Trendwave, but with everything. We both did, I replied. We let childhood competition define our adult relationship, and we both lost something valuable because of it. The conversation shifted then, becoming more open than any we had shared since childhood. Marcus admitted the insecurities that had driven his constant status seeking and job hopping. I confessed the resentment I had harbored over years of feeling overshadowed and undervalued by our family. By the time we ordered a second round of coffee, we had moved from recriminations to tentative planning. I offered to help him identify companies that might value his relationship-building skills. He suggested ways I might present my technical achievements more effectively to non-technical audiences, including our parents. Speaking of mom and dad, Marcus said as our meeting drew to a close, we should probably talk to them together. They are caught in the middle of this, and they are not handling it well. Agreed, I replied. And Grandma Eleanor should be there too. She may have precipitated the crisis, but she also saw the problem more clearly than anyone. The following weekend, we gathered at our parents' home. The initial awkwardness was palpable, with Mom fussing nervously about refreshments and Dad maintaining a stiff formality. Grandma Eleanor, however, simply smiled, as if she had been expecting this development all along. "We wanted to talk to you all together," I began once we were settled in the living room. "About Easter, about our careers, and about some patterns that have developed in our family." The conversation that followed was not easy. There were moments of defensiveness, particularly from our parents when Marcus gently pointed out their historical pattern of favoring his more visible achievements over my quieter successes. There were tears when I admitted how that favoritism had affected me. There was uncomfortable silence when Grandma Eleanor suggested that their parenting had inadvertently fostered unhealthy competition rather than brotherhood. But by the end of the afternoon, something had shifted. Dad acknowledged, for the first time, his own insecurities about understanding my technical work and how that had led him to focus more on Marcus's more accessible career path. Mom admitted that she had always worried more about Marcus because I had seemed more self-sufficient, not realizing that her concern had manifested as favoritism. "I always saw you both clearly," Grandma Eleanor said, as the conversation wound down. "Different strengths, different paths, but equally valuable. I am glad you are finally seeing that in each other." As Marcus and I left together, walking to our separately parked cars, he paused. "This does not fix everything," he said. "We have decades of patterns to unlearn." "I know," I agreed, "but it is a start." He extended his hand, then seemed to reconsider, and pulled me into a brief, slightly awkward hug instead. "See you at the office tomorrow, little brother." I blinked in surprise. "The office?" A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Your recommendation was approved. I start Monday as the Director of Client Relations. Jacob Chen called me yesterday. Apparently, I am still valuable to NextGen after all." As I watched him drive away, I felt a weight lifting that I had carried for longer than I could remember. The road ahead would not be simple. But for the first time in our adult lives, Marcus and I were on the same path, rather than competing ones. 1 year later, we gathered again for Easter dinner at my parents' home. The contrast with the previous year could not have been more striking. Instead of sitting across from each other as rivals, Marcus and I arrived together, having carpooled from a client meeting that had run late. We were in the middle of a spirited but good-natured debate about integration timelines for a new acquisition when we entered the house. "The development team needs at least 6 weeks," I insisted, as we hung our jackets in the entryway. "The clients are expecting results in 4, Marcus countered. "We already promised a timeline in the preliminary meetings. Then you will need to manage their expectations while we ensure the product actually works," I replied. A statement that would have been loaded with resentment a year ago, but now carried only professional disagreement between respected colleagues. Mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "Are you two arguing about work on a holiday?" she asked. But her tone was light, almost pleased at the now familiar dynamic. "Not arguing," Marcus clarified, giving her a quick hug. "Strategic planning. There is a difference. Save it for Monday." Dad called from the living room, where he was watching a basketball game. "Family time now. Work later." The easy, relaxed atmosphere continued through dinner. Gone was the tension of the previous year, replaced by genuine conversation and interest. When the topic turned to our careers, both parents asked thoughtful questions about my technical challenges as well as Marcus's client strategies. They had made a sincere effort over the past year to understand both our professional worlds. As we enjoyed Mom's traditional coconut cream pie for dessert, Grandma Eleanor, now 83, but still sharp as ever, smiled contentedly at the scene before her. "What a difference a year makes," she observed quietly to me when the conversation had moved on to Cousin Rachel's toddler's latest antics. She was right. The changes went far beyond the surface harmony of a family dinner. In the year since the acquisition and confrontation, both Marcus and I had undergone significant personal and professional growth. For my part, I had emerged from the shadow of feeling perpetually second best. The validation I had always sought from my family had come. But more importantly, I had learned that external validation was far less valuable than I had believed. My confidence now came from within, from knowing my own worth rather than having it acknowledged by others. The professional growth had been equally significant. Working with Marcus had pushed me to develop skills I had previously avoided, particularly in communication and leadership. I had become more effective at translating technical concepts for non-technical audiences, which had accelerated my advancement at Next General. 6 months after Easter, I had been promoted to Chief Technology Officer when my predecessor retired. Marcus's transformation had been even more profound. The humbling experience of having his company acquired and his professional identity challenged had triggered genuine self-reflection. He had embraced the opportunity at NextGen with unexpected humility, acknowledging the gaps in his technical understanding and working to address them. Rather than relying solely on charm and presentation skills, he had developed substantive expertise that earned him genuine respect among the technical teams. Perhaps most surprisingly, he had become a mentor to junior team members, particularly those struggling to balance technical skills with business acumen. The man who had once defined himself by status and title had discovered a deeper satisfaction in helping others develop their potential. Our professional collaboration had evolved from initially awkward to genuinely synergistic. My technical vision paired with his relationship-building skills had resulted in several successful initiatives that neither of us could have accomplished alone. The executive team had taken notice, and there were whispers of creating a new innovation division that we would co-lead. "Earth to Dan," Marcus called, breaking into my thoughts. "Dad asked if you want to watch the game." I looked up to find the family watching me expectantly. "Sorry. Just thinking about how much has changed since last Easter. For the better, I hope," Mom said, a hint of lingering concern in her voice. "Definitely for the better," I confirmed. A year ago, I was technically successful but personally isolated. I had achievements, but not much fulfillment, and I had the appearance of success without the substance, Marcus added, surprising me with his candor in front of the family. I was so busy trying to impress everyone that I lost track of building something real. Dad nodded thoughtfully. "I think we all learned something important last year." "Caroline and I certainly did. About seeing both your sons clearly," Mom agreed, reaching out to squeeze my hand, "and valuing different kinds of strengths equally." After dinner, as the evening wound down, Marcus and I found ourselves on the back porch, much as Grandma Eleanor and I had been a year earlier. The spring air was cool but pleasant, carrying the scent of Mom's newly planted flowers. "I never thanked you," Marcus said after a comfortable silence. "For what?" "For reaching out after Easter last year. For making the first move toward reconciliation when I was too angry and humiliated to do it myself." I shrugged. "Grandma Eleanor suggested it. She said you were not capable of taking that step at that moment." Marcus laughed softly. "She has always seen through both of us, has not she?" Terrifying and comforting at the same time. "She saw what our parents did not," I agreed. "That their well-intentioned parenting was creating a harmful dynamic between us. And what we did not see ourselves," Marcus added. "That we were both insecure, just in different ways. I was always jealous of your technical abilities. You know, the way you could create something real, something that worked, while I was just talking about other people's creations." His admission still surprised me, even after a year of improved communication. "And I was jealous of your confidence, your ease with people, the way rooms would light up when you entered them. Quite a pair we made," he said with a rueful smile, each thinking the other had it easier, each compensating in our own way. "And now?" I asked. "Now I think we are finally brothers instead of rivals," he replied simply, "and better men for it." As we prepared to leave that evening, Grandma Eleanor pulled me aside for a private word. "I am proud of you, Daniel," she said, her eyes bright with emotion, "not just for your professional success, but for your courage in healing what was broken. You gave me the push I needed," I reminded her. "That question at dinner last year changed everything." She patted my cheek affectionately. "I only spoke the truth that needed speaking. You did the harder work that followed." Looking back now, I can see that last Easter was not just about a moment of family drama or professional revelation. It was about breaking patterns that had limited both Marcus and me for decades. It was about learning that true success is not measured by comparison to others, but by personal growth and meaningful connections. The lesson I carry forward is that authentic achievement includes lifting others rather than climbing over them. That competition might drive short-term results, but collaboration creates something more sustainable and fulfilling. And that sometimes the most important step in healing a relationship is simply being honest about the wound. Has your family ever experienced a moment of truth that changed everything? Have old rivalries or misunderstandings shaped your relationships in ways you are still untangling? Drop a comment below to share your experience. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories of family transformation, and share this with someone who might need to hear that reconciliation is possible, even after years of competition. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that sometimes the most uncomfortable moments lead to the most meaningful growth.